Ed McGivern was one of the greatest handgunners to ever live, setting world records in speed and accuracy shooting to extreme long-range feats. If it could be done with a handgun, Mr. McGivern did it. He wasn't the tall, dark, and handsome gunfighter of the dime store novels of the time. Standing at 5'5", he was shaped like a barrel, and he was not a man you'd pass on the street and be intimidated by. He was a sign painter by trade, but his passion, talent, and hours of practice made him the fastest gun in the world. As a young boy, he became fascinated with guns, and at an early age he taught himself to shoot. He found out that the double-action revolver suited him well. He became an exhibition shooter, and he traveled the country between the two world wars, doing tricks like shooting 2 aerial targets simultaneously with 2 different revolvers. He progressed into extreme long-range shooting that even impressed the grand old man himself, Elmer Keith. In Keith's book, Sixguns, Elmer talks about the amazing exploits and impeccable technique of McGivern. Keith states, McGivern was the fastest and finest double-action revolver shot that ever lived, and probably ever will. High praise from one of the world's greatest shooting authorities. The number of targets grew in his act, and so did how rapidly he'd fire at them. He devoted his life to the endeavor, and it all culminated when McGivern was recorded in the Guinness Book of World Records for shooting 2 times from 15 feet, 5 shots that could be covered by a half-dollar piece in 45 100ths of a second on August 20th, 1932. Oh, by the way, he was 58 years old. He performed many more exhibitions throughout the years, always adding tricks and pushing himself in speed and accuracy. Arthritis eventually ended Mr. McGivern's touring career, so he had to change directions. He began to use what he had learned to train law enforcement officers and servicemen alike in practical application of fast and accurate shooting. When he passed in 1957 at the age of 83, he was still a student of the gun and shooting alike, constantly studying on how he could be a better gunman. His lessons to this day on shooting fundamentals, sight alignment, sight picture, trigger control, and how to practice are still paramount. You can find many of these great parcels of knowledge in his book, Ed McGivern's Book of Fast and Fancy Revolver Shooting, published in 1938. Now that we have some history on Mr. McGivern, let's talk about some of his guns. First up is one of the rarest pre-war K32s that you'll ever see. Only 96 K32 hand ejector first model target revolvers were ever manufactured. These 5-screw Smiths were built on square butt target frames with pinned 6-inch round barrels. They were only made between 1936 and 1941. The factory letter confirms that this was shipped May 10, 1939 with a gold bead McGivern front sight, humpback hammer, and checkered walnut grips, and it was shipped to Ed McGivern of Lewiston, Montana. The gun is in remarkable condition, and everything matches on it. On top of the revolver and documentation, there's some scrapbook pages with it, from none other than D.B. Wesson, the vice president of Smith Wesson. His personal scrapbook pages, including newspaper articles and photos notating McGivern's exploits. In one of the photos, McGivern is surrounded by onlookers as he shoots cans out of the sky. By the way, the photograph is also signed by him. Now for our second gun on the table. Registered Magnum 2902 was shipped to McGivern May 25, 1938. It was originally shipped with a 5-inch barrel, McGivern bead front sight, and a deep U-notch rear. This gun was of course shipped free of charge, but directly from Smith & Wesson VP D.B. Wesson for fast double-action shooting. There is a letter from McGivern to D.B. Wesson requesting a 5-inch barreled Magnum revolver for shooting tournaments coming up in June and July in Great Falls, Billings, and Missoula. On May 23, 1938, D.B. Wesson replied to McGivern and explained that he did have a 5-inch available and would send it with the equipment that he asked for. He also notated that he'd send a Bauman quick draw front sight and a square notch rear in case the FBI boys would rather see him use standard equipment. The barrel length was shortened to 3.5 inches and the rear sight is now a square notch. While many of these guns were altered, there includes documentation to suggest what happened. In a letter from Smith & Wesson's historian, Mr. Roy Jinks, he noted that he was unable to confirm that the revolver was ever returned to Smith & Wesson for the purpose of shortening the barrel. He stated that it was not common for shooters such as McGivern to alter firearms from their original factory shipped configuration. Although the revolver is without the factory rework star proof, gun expert Chuck Carwin concluded that the quality of the work shows that the barrel was shortened and refinished at the factory. Carwin wrote, "The clues to indicate this are the way that the rib in front of the front sight had been removed in front of the front sight precisely the way factory 3.5-inch barrel was configured during the period, and the fact that the same area appears to have the original factory bluing. The hammer spur is offset to the right side, one of the alterations Ed McGivern is known to have performed on many of his Smith & Wessons, and is further confirmation of his ownership and usage. This revolver was documented in a copy of firearms Mr. McGivern owned when he died. A list is included with this lot. Also included is the correspondence between McGivern and Wesson about acquiring this gun, articles about Mr. McGivern, and a signed copy of his book published in 1938, and loose scrapbook pages from D.B. Wesson's personal scrapbook. This gun has belonged to many of the collecting greats, including Thomas Floyd, Lee Jarrett, and David Carroll. These Smiths, and many more fine rare historic Smiths, are from the inscrutable collection of Mr. Dave Ballantyne. Mr. Ballantyne has spent decades researching and acquiring these truly historic Smith & Wessons. Preserving their history has been his life's work. The idea of Mr. Ed McGivern is something that we all have inside of us. Many of us aren't athletic specimens, and a lot of us are past our prime. But the fact of the matter is that Mr. McGivern, short and round, unassuming, with a little bit of practice, he set world records at 58 years old. And from what I've read, and I've read a lot, a very nice man. Ed McGivern was a true pioneer of handgun shooting. He set world records, he entertained the masses, and spent his life educating. His legacy is limitless when you think of all who used him as the foundation of their own exploits. There are very few of Mr. McGivern's guns in private collections today. This is your opportunity to own a gun that belonged to the legend, the fastest and finest of all revolver shooters. And these guns are only available right here at Rock Island Auction Company.